Support for BLM implodes as more corruption at the top is revealed. We're going to look at that collapsing support. We're going to see the latest shocking revelations, and stick me to the very end of this video when I'll reveal the real reason why the days of BLM are indeed coming to an end. You are not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. Great to be with you. As always, I am your daily fake news antidote. So come on into your Patriot Professor's Den, where I'll help you to think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent times. If you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe. But before we begin, I want to introduce you to an amazing traditionalist company that you're going to absolutely love, and your friends are too. They're called Old Country Soap. They're a wonderful alternative to store soaps. I use Old Country myself. I love them. Oh, the scent is amazing. These soaps are made on a farm in South Dakota using traditional Amish techniques and natural, locally sourced ingredients without any of the harsh chemicals that could dry out your hair and your skin. Every bar of Old Country Soap includes pure and unfiltered bentonite clay, which works wonders. It helps to soothe and relieve dry and sensitive skin. It's known for its healing properties that help with psoriasis and eczema. It's amazing stuff, gang. You gotta try this soap out. Just the pure natural scent alone is unbelievable. Click on the link below right now, and for a limited time, you're going to get an exclusive discount if you use my promo code Turley. And they're even going to throw in a free shower-enhancing exfoliation soap bag with every purchase. So don't wait, click on that link below or visit oldcountrysoap.com. All right, let's dive right in here. We got some updates here on the state of BLM, Black Lives Matter, which was almost this time 2 years ago in the summer of 2020, without a doubt the single most powerful political enterprise in the nation. This, of course, was the wishful thinking of the New York Times that went so far as to laud the movement as possibly being the largest movement in U.S. history. That's right, BLM. BLM, all these left-wing activists disguised as journalists over the New York Times. According to them, BLM, no, not the Reagan Coalition, not the MAGA Party, not the Tea Party, no, BLM is indeed the largest, most expansive, most colossal, far-reaching, wide-ranging movement in the history of our nation. How do we take these clowns seriously? Well, we predicted here on this channel that revered status would indeed implode. It was a purely tribalist movement that had no place for a big tent coalition, so it was guaranteed to collapse, and it looks like that collapse is here. The latest YouGov poll has just come out, and it shows BLM currently polling an embarrassing 31% approval. Gang, that's Joe Biden territory if you want comparison. Now, contrast this to where we were in the summer of 2020 when the New York Times was fawning and drooling all over BLM. They were polling then around 60% approval. Rasmussen at the time found them at 62% approval. We're now seeing a polling collapse of more than 30 points. And when you dig into the numbers, it's really interesting because at least part of that collapse is due to the fact that blacks are beginning to turn their backs on BLM along with every other demographic. Support among blacks has dropped from 67% last April to just 56% today. In terms of support for BLM tactics and strategies, black support has gone from 65% to 49% approval. Now, this poll by YouGov corroborates another poll that just came out from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, which also found a dramatic plummeting in support for BLM from 48% a couple of months back to now just 41%. And support for its strategies and tactics has plummeted to 31%. So this poll wasn't as dire as the YouGov poll, but both polls showed dramatic decline in support for BLM. So much for the New York Times reporting news. As you can see, they clearly peddle in propaganda. Now, what all these polls reflect, at least at one level, is a rather pronounced degree of disgust in response to revelations of financial corruption at the highest ranks of BLM. As I'm sure many of you already know, Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation released their first set of public tax documents with the IRS, which revealed that co-founder Patrice Cullors used BLM funds to pay her graffiti artist brother $840,000 for, quote, security services, as well as another nearly $1 million to a company owned by her child's father for, quote, creative services. So we're clearly seeing a pattern of overt nepotism here. The foundation's biggest payout was a whopping $2.1 million to a consulting firm owned by another BLM board member. Oh, and we can't forget the $6 million property that BLM bought in Los Angeles, which of course went well with Calor's recent massive real estate buying spree, which included the purchasing of a $1.4 million home in an exclusive Los Angeles neighborhood where the vast majority of the residents there are indeed white. The home is reported to be about a 15-minute drive from Malibu beaches, but as it turns out, the glitzy LA home was only one of a number of other properties she purchased all around the same time. It was reported that this self-described Marxist, mind you, actually snagged a total of 4 high-end homes for $3.2 million. Again, where's the New York Times on all this? So obviously at one level, there's no question. This kind of reported corruption is going to erode support of your movement. But I would argue there is something much deeper going on here in terms of the collapse in support of BLM. And that leads us to this notion of neo-tribalism that a number of scholars believe would begin to surge at the beginning of the century with the waning of the old globalist world order and the rise of a more nationalist populist age. It's what the French sociologist Michel Maffesli termed neo-tribalism. Neo-tribalism is the notion that the world is slowly but surely reorganizing around racial and ethnic identities. And the basic argument here is that with the death of the old Soviet Union on the one hand and the increasing waning of liberal globalism on the other, the world is basically fracturing. It's breaking up. And populations are increasingly reorganizing themselves around their own shared identity markers such as nation, culture, custom, tradition, ethnicity, and race. So that neo-tribalism is working itself out in two directions. Populations are either moving toward a more culturally assimilated civic nationalism, like what's advocated by President Trump and the MAGA movement. It's the civic renewal of a multi-ethnic nation, but that's united around the cultural specificity of renewed national symbols, like Russia, right? Russia has over 100 different ethnicities, but they're all united around a unique sense of Russianness. So either neo-tribalism moves towards that civic nationalism, or it balkanizes into various ethno-nationalisms, where racial homogeneity becomes the new national organizing factor. Interestingly, either way, nationalism wins, right? Big picture, the left basically dies, and the two political sides become more or less clashing visions of nationalism, either a civic nationalism, which is multi-ethnic, right, or more an ethno-nationalism and the increasing balkanization of around racialized, homogenous racialized identities. This is what BLM is. BLM is an ethno-nationalist tribalized group. But here's the key. There's a particular kind of backlash against such a tribalized outworking, and that backlash is what accounts, I think, ultimately for their imploding poll numbers. But before we get into that, I'm excited to announce the upcoming release of Turley Talks Productions' first original documentary, The Return of the American Patriot, The Rise of Pennsylvania. The documentary is a deep dive into the grassroots patriot movement, specifically in Pennsylvania, that recently saw America First fighters like Doug Mastriano nominated for governor. This Friday, you're going to be able to catch the full trailer, but here is a little sample.
Here, the people are tired of being run over by the establishment. We're sick and tired of being lied to.
COVID really brought that home to a lot of people. We have never done what we did this last time, and it should have never happened.
So you're going to love it. I cannot wait for you to see it. Keep an eye out for it this Friday. All right, so what's this backlash against tribalism? Professor Carol Swain, who is herself black and a very vocal opponent against Black Lives Matter, she sees them as nothing more than a front for cultural Marxism. She authored a very large and substantial study, literally 20 years back, that predicted in many respects a backlash against something akin to BLM. She noticed that back in 2002, so she's way ahead of the curve here, she noted that back then what she called the new white nationalism is different than the white nationalisms of the past, where white people were understood to be biologically or genetically or intellectually superior to non-whites. Okay, that's the KKK or white supremacists, some kind of social Darwinism that tended to characterize the first half of the 20th century. The new white nationalists, as she calls them, are instead motivated by something very different in that they're not interested in biological or genetic differentiation. Instead, they're making the case that the current project of multiculturalism is unfairly and arbitrarily discriminating against white people and white interests on behalf of non-white constituents whose interests are taking a priority in terms of national policy. In other words, if blacks get to vote their political interests, and Latinos get to vote their political interests, and Asians get to vote their political interests, you see the pattern, and so on, then why on earth cannot whites vote on behalf of their own political interests? So what she's calling the new white nationalism is not so much motivated by any overt racism. In fact, all indicators show that racism is at an all-time low. It's been on decline for 10 years. It's not overt racism that's pushing this. It's rather the new white nationalism provoked more by what whites perceive as a deliberate discrimination against them simply because they happen to be white. And Professor Swain's work has been corroborated of late by a very relevant study that found that half of white Americans believe that, quote, whites have replaced blacks as the primary victims of discrimination. And so there does appear to be an increasing backlash against BLM precisely because there's an increasing backlash against the unfair and discriminatory application of civil rights. And as such, it does appear that the days of BLM and its cultural Marxist influence are waning, which signals good news for the rise and ultimate success of civic MAGA nationalism in our time. Now, before you go, you will definitely want to check out my latest video I just uploaded on the backlash against how the Democrats are once again exploiting national tragedy for their own selfish political gain. You're not going to want to miss it, so make sure to click on that link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.